lower range of getting a pair of trousers for $2 or $5 or whatever, that's available for people who genuinely cannot afford new clothing.
Can you still offer that, Murray?
We can indeed, and we do, and we provide that to people who really, really need it.
It's good to hear.
Awesome.
Thank you very much, Wellington City Missioner Murray Edridge there. Fascinating what's going on in the op shop business right there. Anja Ranam and Mark Knopf-Thomas, thank you very much for your time today, guys.
Oh, lovely.
Thank you. It's awesome.
It's been a pleasure to have you on. It is coming up towards 5 o'clock now, and we're going to pass you over to the Checkpoint team and the wonderful Lisa Owen.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere aki nei. A winter freeze that you might just welcome. One of the two big supermarket chains is going to cap the price of 500 essential items for at least the winter months. But why are they charging so much in the first place, and who will end up paying? Debunking the housing crisis, we tour a new development with homes of up to 8 bedrooms, encouraging groups or families to live together and share the mortgage. In Auckland College, counting the cost of coaxing students back to school. Why social media is being blamed for a spate of car thefts on the Kapiti coast. And the bureaucracy blocking bollards that could block the Ram Raiders. Don't forget you can catch us live on Facebook and Freeview Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5. Ahi Marie, I'm Evie Ashton. An Auckland school is spending more than $100,000 on trying to get students to come to school. Otahu College has hired 2 attendance navigators and taken out radio ads to combat what Principal Neil Watson sees as the country's biggest educational issue, truancy.
Effectively, we're probably spending about $120,000 or more a year on those 2 positions, and they're working hard to get the students back, but it is a challenge. It's not a simple matter of saying get back to school. There's lots of reasons, and you've got to build a relationship with the families to be able to do that.
Neil Watson says about 20% of the college's students are absent from class. Bollards are in big demand from Auckland shop owners following a spate of ram raids and smash-and-grab burglaries in the city. Contractors and councils have seen a surge in inquiries about installing the protective posts. Jonty Dine reports.
When cars are turned into weapons against business premises, bollards have proved highly effective at preventing ram raids. Demand for the posts is now skyrocketing, with one contractor having had a 10-fold increase in the number of inquiries. Mark Taylor, who's the managing director of the safety equipment supplier True Built, says shop owners are on the offensive. However, he says it's not as simple as a phone call, as underground services can potentially prevent the installation of bollards.
Hundreds of cars a month are being stolen on the Kapiti coast. The police have confirmed an average of 10 car thefts a day between February and April, and communities need to work together on the problem. District Mayor K. Guru Nathan says local government doesn't have the resources, but he's keen to work with the police and central government to see what can be done. Mr. Guru Nathan believes the crime wave is related to the socio-economic impact of the pandemic. The National Party wants a vote of no confidence in the Speaker of the House. Trevor Mallard trespassed 5 former MPs from Parliament for visiting the occupation earlier this year, then withdrew the notices after political backlash and the threat of legal action. National has tried to force no confidence votes in Mr Mallard before, but front bench MP Chris Bishop says this is surely the final straw.
Trevor Mallard was an embarrassment months ago. The Prime Minister should lose confidence in him, sack him. Let's move on and try and make the 18 months to the next election really good for parliamentary democracy, not the embarrassing, unedifying spectacle it's been in the last few months.
Trevor Mallard has repeatedly refused to be interviewed by RNZ. Former New Zealand Broadcasting school students are relieved at the outcome of a review of the school's culture, but say it understates the impact on students. The review has found a culture of bullying and harassment among students and by some staff. One former student says a competitive, alcohol-driven culture was the standard when she was completing the course.
I think that the broadcasting school could be like the best place ever, and it just, unfortunately, is, in my opinion, the start of so many root issues that you see in the media industry, as far as like harassment, boys club, overworked, underpaid.
The school says it will fully implement the report's 60 recommendations. And Auckland councillors have endorsed a $300 million cycleway plan despite objections to the cost. The 10-year plan for more cycleways on strategic routes depends on controversial cuts to roadside car parking going ahead. Before the Planning Committee vote this afternoon, Councillor Wayne Walker questioned what he called the "if you build it, they will come" approach at a cost of $5 million a kilometre.
While I'm entirely supportive of funding cycling, I've got real concerns around the gold-plated approach that we continue to take and the real absence of cycling numbers on many cycleways.
To sport, and All Blacks hooker Dane Coles will make his first appearance of the season, while another All Black veteran makes his debut when the Hurricanes play the Fijian Ndrua in their Super Rugby match in Wellington on Sunday. Coles has finally recovered from a hamstring injury he suffered on the All Blacks Northern Tour at the end of last year. 34-year-old Owen Franks will also take the field after several months off with a torn Achilles. Warriors fullback Reece Walsh has dismissed speculation he will leave the club next year. Walsh has been linked to the Brisbane-based Dolphins, who'll join the NRL in 2023. But Walsh says neither he nor his management has spoken to other clubs.
Heaps of people are talking, and I feel like we're starting to not so much stress them out, but, bit of a red flag was, getting put up there. So it's not coming from my mouth, mate. Don't believe it.
FIFA has confirmed that New Zealand's intercontinental playoff against Costa Rica for a place at October's Football World Cup in Qatar will be played in Doha on June the 15th. The winner will go into Group E along with Spain, Germany and Japan. Meanwhile, the Phoenix can secure a place in the A-League playoffs with a victory over Western Sydney tonight. And in a dramatic Champions League semi-final in Spain, Real Madrid's beaten Manchester City 3-1 in extra time and 6-5 on aggregate, and will play Liverpool in the final. That's the news.
People are waiting for surgery.
When I stopped operating, I could hardly do any, not because of advancing years, but because the bureaucracy and the inefficiency in the system wouldn't allow you to.
People are waiting for cycleways.
There needs to be a rumble strip or a small concrete barrier that protects cyclists from the cars. Otherwise, you won't get people out commuting.
And people are waiting for dentists.
Over 66% of children in that service needing checkups, and not enough oral health therapists to provide the treatment that these children need.
We won't keep you waiting. Morning Report weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
You're on Checkpoint with Lisa Owen next. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. For Northland and Coromandel, partly cloudy with a few showers clearing about the Coromandel Peninsula tomorrow afternoon. Gisborne, partly cloudy with a few showers clearing this evening. For the remaining North Island regions, fine apart from areas of low cloud or fog in the morning and evening. Looking to Te Waipoinamu, Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, cloudy periods and a few showers clearing from Bulla this evening. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and coastal Otago, fine apart from areas of low cloud or fog that is clearing this afternoon but returning tomorrow morning for a time. Southland and the remainder of Otago, fine apart from areas of high cloud. And for Rekohu, the Chatham Islands, low cloud or fog, a few showers are developing tomorrow morning. It's coming up to 7 minutes past 5. I'll have news headlines for you at 5:30.
Nā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint i tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. One of our largest supermarket chains is temporarily freezing prices on 500 items in response to what's been called a cost of living crisis. Countdown says it's identified an array of winter staples, including diced tomatoes, butter, cheese, sugar, flour and shaved ham. And whatever price they are on May 9th is the price they will stay for the winter months, no matter what happens with inflation. More on that shortly, but earlier this week, the boss of Countdown's parent company went public, saying it was simplistic and unfair to blame supermarkets for increases in the cost of living. Yet a Commerce Commission report released in March found there's a lack of competition in the grocery market. Prices appear high by international standards, and it's estimated the two main players are making about $430 million in excess profits a year. And you, our listeners, keep asking why the price of the grocery shop is sky high and seemingly going higher. Countdown's Steve Mills offers this explanation.
There's no doubt tough out there. You know, we're all paying more for fuel, transport, raw commodities, labour, particularly in the farming community, animal feed, fertiliser, export charges. Average price increases we're seeing come across our desks is around 9% at the moment. And in the last 10 months, we've received close to 1,000 price increases, which is more than double the same period last year.
So when you say 1,000 price increases, who comes to you and asks for that?
Our suppliers.
Right. So can you give us some examples?
Well, I can't give you any direct examples, but what I can say that on average they're around 9%. But, I've seen some come through up to 25%, and probably more borne about by the effects that's happening overseas with regards to Ukraine, global supply challenges, freight, particularly with containers. What we're seeing is shipping rate increases up to 640%, fuel costs up 30%. And these will all affect pretty much everything that we sell. But what I would like to say is that we are working very closely with our suppliers, and they've been very proactive about how we can both try and absorb cost price increases and mitigate those where we can. And then so we're trying to pass on the least amount of increases we possibly can to our customers.
The CEO of Woolworths wrote an opinion piece saying that the single biggest factor in prices is what the suppliers are charging. So how much of a hit are you taking in order to keep prices lower for shoppers?
Well, we're taking quite a hit, but well, I'm not necessarily saying we're taking a hit. We're absorbing increases like our suppliers are. I think 63% or 63 cents on the dollar of the price that we're getting from suppliers is made up of raw materials, packaging, freight costs, and that. We're at 2.4% profit in our business. Yes, we're a high volume, but we're a very low margin business.
Yeah, but the Commerce Commission says that supermarkets made $430 million in excess profits per year. And, that study was conducted before the whole COVID and the record inflation. So how do you explain that? Because the implication of that is that you were creaming profits before prices started to go up with inflation.
Well, Lisa, I don't see the statement that was made. I don't see those numbers. What I see is the 2.4 cents on the dollar. And, making profit is not a bad thing. And, we're investing $1 billion over the next couple of years in infrastructure with regards to our distribution centres to make it more efficient, new stores, refurbishing our stores, adding new technology into a digital and online business to provide customers with a much better service than we currently are today.
Can you appreciate how for some customers that doesn't mean much if they can't afford a bottle of milk or a block of cheese?
I can appreciate that, and that's why we have announced today that it's going to be effective on the 9th of May, that we're doing great price freeze on our winter products, 500 essential lines across butter, cheese, sugar, flour, rice, and we'll commit to holding those prices, and they will not have any price increases during winter.
Explain that to me a bit more, because this is what they've done in Australia, right? So you're following in the footsteps of your parent company.
Well, Australia haven't done exactly what we're doing. What we've done is looked at the essential products, and so like 500 to start with. We're going to grow that as we have more conversations with suppliers, and we're making sure that a person can come in and shop their weekly shop across these products. It's going to be great for customers as we head into the cooler months.
So when are the prices frozen from?
We're saying we're going to be freezing from the 9th of May.
From the 9th of May, and for the months of winter, you will hold them at the price they are on the 9th of May?
For winter.
Just to be very clear, when does that price freeze come off then?
So that'll get us close to Christmas, and obviously where Christmas brings a different product range that the customers are looking for as we move more into spring and summer. So
you're potentially talking about 6 months worth of frozen prices on certain things?
I think what we're saying is that winter, but if we can extend it, we would gladly do that.
Can you give us a few more examples of what items you're talking about here?
Well, I haven't got any examples exactly of the products with me, but they are flour, sugar, pasta, rice, baked beans. We have some fresh and hot and cold meats. I think we've got a great range of products that will really meet the needs of the customers as of today.
And that's going to be in any Countdown store that you go to?
Nationally.
Who takes the hit here? Because if you can't put the prices up and costs go up and you're frozen the prices, people will want to know that those growing these goods or making them aren't going to be left out of pocket.
Yeah, well, that's why we continue to work with our suppliers about what we can do and how long we can do it for. And I think it's a partnership that we've been working with our suppliers on for a number of months now, and we've been able to bring it to the shop floor.
Because again, that was one of the criticisms in the Commerce Commission report, is that some suppliers feel like there's not fair negotiations because there is, a power difference here. So can you guarantee that you are still going to give your growers and suppliers fair prices while freezing these prices for your customers?
Well, I can't comment on how other retailers operate, but what I can say is that we do an Advantage and a Nielsen survey in New Zealand, independent, and Countdown has been rated number one for the last 2 years. So I think that we do have a very good relationship with our suppliers.
And that is Steve Mills from Countdown. It is almost 5:15. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Fed up with students not turning up, an Auckland college has hired attendance navigators and taken out radio ads to try to get kids into the classroom. New PPTA numbers show 60,000 students are missing at least 3 days of school every fortnight, and nearly 40% of students are not attending regularly. The government's announced $88 million in funding to try and tackle what some are calling a truancy crisis. But Otahuhu College's principal says funding alone isn't enough, and some of his school's previous pleas for help have fallen on deaf ears. Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe have the story.
The morning rush at Otahuhu College, a quick snack stop at the dairy, a joke with some mates, and it's through the school gates. On the surface, turnout on a cool Thursday morning looks pretty good, but Principal Neil Watson's under no illusions. Frankly, it could be better.
It's a lot of kids, and I think your boss would be pretty annoyed if you only turned up Monday to Thursday for your job. And that's what 80% is. And it has a huge impact when you have a number of students away from your class, because how do you progress for those who are there?
It is, as he puts it, probably the major educational issue in New Zealand right now, spanning all demographics and locations. So now the college is digging into its own coffers.
We've employed 2 full-time, we call them attendance navigators, to work with our families and support them in getting their children back to school. So effectively we're probably spending about $120,000 or more a year on those 2 positions, and they're working hard to get the students back, but it is a challenge.
Otahuhu College has even resorted to taking out advertisements with local media.
And we tried to get the Ministry of Education to do something about attendance 4 or 5 years ago. And they said they would get back to us, so we're looking forward to that response. In the meantime, in the space of about 30 minutes, we phoned up the Pacific Media Network and they put some ads together around attendance and the importance of coming to school.
Back at the school gates, we run into head boy Tofi Seuli, who says the COVID-19 hangover is still showing.
And I think families as well, they believe that the COVID really isn't safe, school isn't really safe, and that the COVID is still out there, so they want to keep their kids back at school.
And as some of his peers put it, why stay at school when there's money to be made, family to support?
I think some families are struggling here. So the kids have to work in order to provide for their families. If their parents can't work.
Probably their sleeping schedule. Probably sleeping schedule, or be worried to get sick. Probably scared. It's probably scared to catch it and make their parents lose their jobs.
Just around the corner, it's also rush hour at Jean Batten Primary.
We are also scared of COVID, but there's no other options with us. Me and my partner both working. We do work from home. We have options for that. But we have to get kids to school. We can't keep them at home and work. It's hard. It's very hard.
Most parents tell us they're too busy not to have the kids at school. But Principal Ngāri Leonard says not all families here are in the same boat.
When we've rung home, we have actually tried to work on getting our children back, and we've made individual phone calls to a long list of people, and most parents have appreciated a little bit of a wake-up call. Come on, Mum, get your children back to school, and they have. But the statistics show at the moment across New Zealand that that it is a problem we're facing, and it's an urgent problem.
At the beginning of the year, attendance was at 20 to 30% before rocketing up to the 80s. People are quick to blame lazy parents, but Nadi says there's often a little more to it than that.
That really saddens me, actually, to hear people talk like that. For some families, they've actually moved out of the district and they've had to go and live with other family members in order to financially survive this particular time in our society.
So now Wellington is digging into its pockets, announcing $88 million for local education needs. While that's welcome, back at Otahuhu College, Neil Watson says priorities are out of kilter, with a similar amount, $86 million, also announced to help people get a driver's licence.
But I think everybody watching and listening will know that people want their driver's licence, and that's a reasonably straightforward issue to deal with. Addressing a long history of truancy and absence from school is a lot more complex issue, and it needs to be funded significantly to improve the outcomes for our young people.
So what's the solution? Mr. Watson says it's time to look abroad.
Chicago has a 95% attendance rate. So it has snow in Chicago. It has slightly more gun violence in Chicago, yet it has a 95% attendance rate.
And perhaps it's time for some targets. Want that qualification? Mr. Watson says there should be a key requirement. Come to class.
If you were listening to that one on radio, do check out the video from our two Nicks. We'll put it on our webpage. Homai o whakaro, we would love your feedback. Nō reira anei na kaupapa mo te hōtaka nei. Let us know your thoughts on the price freeze for winter goods. One of the main supermarket chains are freezing, capping prices on 500 plus items for the duration of winter at least. And how do we coax reluctant kids back to school? Have you got any ideas? The other thing is we've got a couple of technical problems this evening with our text machine. So email us, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz, or you can tweet us at checkpointrnz. A KiwiSaver fund has blacklisted a chemical company over its CEO's alleged racist and sexist comments about celebrity chef and My Food Bag founder Nadia Lim. In an interview with NBR, the rich lister boss of DGL, Simon Henry, described Ms Lim as a little bit of Eurasian fluff and claimed she was showing cleavage in the company prospectus to sell shares. Investment organisation Kiwi Wealth has responded by adding DGL to its exclusion list. Its CEO, Rhiannon McKinnon, joins us now. Kia ora.
Kia ora, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. Can you talk us through your decision?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. When we saw those comments come through last night, we were appalled, like many others, by the tone, the misogyny, and the racism in that comment. And it made us look again at DGL in terms of red flags around their governance processes, around ESG, and cause us to take it to our responsible investment committee around an exclusion on the basis of the governance of the company.
So, a couple of things there. You've touched on, well, the comments themselves. How would you characterise them?
I think the comments are both misogynistic and racist.
And coming from the mouth of a CEO?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's totally inappropriate for someone at such a senior level to be making comments. Privately is probably one thing, and not something I would agree with. But on a public sort of forum, asking to be on the record is something that seems reckless at best.
And the red flags that you've identified about the company, talk us through those. What worries you about this firm outside of what its CEO has said?
Well, I think when we took a sort of second or a close look at the company, we saw that Simon is actually majority shareholder with 57% of the shares. He's sort of founder and CEO, and he's an executive director, so he's also on the board. And so we felt that a company with sort of maybe tighter governance would have maybe had more controls on his ability to say those comments in public, but also concerns almost for the safety and well-being of any female staff that he might have within the company.
So far, there appears to have been no response from DGL and its board. What do you think of that?
I assume that they're sort of mulling things over, presumably wondering whether they may or may not decide to make an apology. Given that he was particularly forthright in his comments, I wouldn't be surprised if that silence continues.
Have you invested in DGL before?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Right. So how long will you keep them on your blacklist?
I think we'll keep them on the blacklist as long as those concerns around ESG continue. And I suppose while you've got sort of the CEO there as executive director as well, and you're not likely to see any changes in that senior leadership, I think it will remain on our exclusion list.
So just to be a bit clearer on this, would Simon Henry need to go as CEO before you felt comfortable doing any business with this firm?
Most likely, yes.
So what is the message here that you are trying to send?
I think we're trying to send a message around, that responsible investment and knowing where you are putting your money is really important to KiwiSaver investors nowadays. And I think to trying to explain to our sort of 150,000 female KiwiSaver customers that we have, that we're investing in companies where people feel that they can make comments around women so publicly, I think is a concern. And so, I think KiwiSaver and other investment funds can really afford to take a stand against sort of ethical issues that they think aren't right, and you're seeing that more and more.
Thank you for talking us through that. That is KiwiWell CEO Rhiannon McKinnon there. It is 24 minutes past 5. Kia amo tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Bollard manufacturers are being inundated with queries as the spate of ram raids continues unabated around the country. Councils are also being approached by shop owners who are looking to strengthen their business protection. Jonty Dine has the story.
When cars become weapons, it's hard to stop them ramming your business, but bollards are incredibly effective, as this petrol station owner discovered.
4 cars, I think stolen cars, they tried to ram raid the shop. Fortunately, we had about 6 bollards, and then I think there was a panic among themselves, and then they flew.
Kanashama's West Auckland petrol station was targeted on April 26, but thanks to his security measures, the offenders left empty-handed.
Because of the bollard, they just smashed the glass, they couldn't enter the shop. Fortunately, nothing was stolen from the shop because they couldn't enter.
Mr. Sharma has now ordered 2 more bollards. Demand for them is skyrocketing as shop owners look to protect themselves against the spike in smash and grab crime. One contractor has had a 10-fold increase in inquiries.
It's shocking to see what's going on in our inquiries through our New Zealand made bollards or our bollard range has skyrocketed in the last week or so, especially in the Auckland region.
Managing Director of Truebuilt, Mark Taylor, says shop owners are being proactive.
They've either had them, they've had scares, or they're just wanting to do something proactively rather than reactively.
There's a wide variety of price and type of bollard, and there can also be issues about permits. Hamilton City Council says bollards are generally not allowed on footpaths as they impede pedestrian and wheelchair access. The council also points out that the vehicles for utilities such as power companies need to access the footpath. Mark Taylor points out that for retailers, it is not as simple as a phone call and installation later that day.
Some shop fronts are right on the boundary limit, so they can't put things out on the footpath. So they've got to go through council to get consent on that. And unfortunately, sometimes those delays may not be good because they could have a ram raid in between times.
Founder of Bully Boy Bollards, Charles Broadhurst, says the car is unlikely to move again after meeting one of his automated bollards at top speed. He says his steel bollards may be more costly, but are far more effective than a removable one. Mr. Broadhurst says automatic bollards are essential in large shopping complexes.
Premises where they've got, say, 50 shops in the premise, they could afford more on security in terms of automatic bollards, which have a far stronger resistance rate.
Truebuilt's Mark Taylor says bollards are a worthwhile investment and offer strong protection.
Well, once the bollards are in, we can just about guarantee you don't have a ram raid. People don't want the cars damaged before they can get into the shop.
Kanashama echoes this sentiment after the ram raid at his store was thwarted.
It's a one-time investment, I would say, not an expenditure.
But bollards can be ugly, and businesses might be able to achieve the same security outcome with a heavy concrete planter or concrete seating. Police spokesperson says they are aware of times where bollards or grills have stopped offenders from successfully gaining entry into buildings. As the daily reports of smash and grab attacks continue, calls to bollard manufacturers are likely to grow. It's not clear whether councils are ready to respond to a parallel growth in permits for installation.
And Auckland Transport's Manager of Parking and Compliance, John Strawbridge, joins us now. Kia ora, John. How complicated is it if you want to stick a bollard in front of your business in Auckland?
Kia ora, Lisa. Thanks for having me on. Look, it's actually not that complicated. Unfortunately, it seems to have been lost in translation a little bit, but I've stepped into the position to oversee it at this time and make sure our communication and also the available information is far more readily out there into the community and the business associations.
So do you need a consent, and what kind of criteria is there for assessing whether you should be allowed to go ahead with it?
Sure, we provide a consent, yes, absolutely. But the criteria is quite broad because no one site is the same. So on a case-by-case basis, we need to have a look at where the proposed intervention is going to be. And pretty much every footpath and road corridor across the region has services in it, internet, power, water, waste, and so obviously there's an engineering component to this that we need to make sure that we're not going to sort of dig a hole and put the lights out everywhere.
John, that does sound slightly complicated though. How long does it take you to get a consent if you want a bollard?
Oh, look, the application process will take no more than 2 weeks, but that said, what I've done is had a close look at our process, set up, given in light of what's happening at the moment, we've got a dedicated person working on that now. Any that come in, we'll be able to turn them around very quickly. The hook here, though, is that we do need to have a look at the site to ensure that from an engineering perspective, it's actually a go.
So there is such a demand that you've basically got an OC in charge of bollards.
I know that sounds a little crazy, doesn't it? But look, in terms of formal applications, there haven't been that many, but inquiries through our people that work out in the community and within the business associations and also our road maintenance teams, there's been a lot of one-on-one, hey, how do we do this? How can we get this done quicker? So, look, we want to respond and be part of the solution as quickly as we can.
So apart from the services, which is obviously one big hurdle, are there regulations around, obstructions on the footpath? You have sight-impaired people. Do you have to have been ram-raided in order to, meet the tick-off list to get bollards?
No, Lisa, you don't. But you're absolutely correct around some of the conditions that are around them. And look, sight impaired, room for wheelchairs, prams, all of that sort of stuff needs to be taken into consideration with any design. Yeah, absolutely. So that's a key part of it. But in terms of us holding things up, I'm looking. We're part of the solution here, and I guess it's a much wider community, family, and social issue that a physical barrier at a shop is probably the last line of defence, isn't it? Given how the community's being affected by this.
John, I understand that you're in contact with this new police retail crime unit. What conversations are you having with them?
You had a really good catch-up yesterday with Matt, who heads that unit, and the conversation was really around, what's going to be the best solution at the places that we need to be. And he asked the upfront question, is the process that AT follows slow and cumbersome, and can we improve it? And, I was right up front with it, and I said, look, we can improve everything. But, I guess, as I said before, the council process is probably the last thing in a long list of things that need to change before these things can be stopped.
Appreciate your time tonight. That is John Strawbridge, who is Auckland Transport's Manager of Parking and Compliance. Kia ora e te iwi e haere nei i a checkpoint. Car thefts shift up a gear on the Kapiti coast. A mortgage beyond your reach? Well, we visit the housing development with properties purpose-built for shared living. That's multiple families or friends covering the mortgage together. And an Auckland councillor says the city can be a Copenhagen in the Pacific with its cycling goals. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or flick us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time to get to the the headlines now, ko Iwi Ano tēnei.
The Countdown supermarket chain says it's freezing the price of several staples through the winter months to help customers cope with the rising cost of living. It says items such as butter, cheese, sugar, flour, hot roast chicken and some vegetables will temporarily stay the same price regardless of what happens with inflation and other costs. Bollards are in big demand as Auckland shop owners seek to protect themselves following a spate of ram raids and smash-and-grab burglaries in the city. Dairies, jewellers and electronics stores have all been targeted and extra security is being sought. The National Party wants a vote of no confidence in the Speaker of the House. Trevor Mallard trespassed Winston Peters and 4 other former MPs from Parliament for visiting the occupation earlier this year, then withdrew the notices after political backlash and the threat of legal action. There are 8,609 new cases of COVID-19 in the community today, and 20 more people have died with the virus. Ukrainian officials say Russian forces have launched an all-out assault on the Azovstal steelworks in the occupied Ukrainian city of Mariupol. 200 civilians are thought to be trapped inside. The United Nations says it has evacuated 300 civilians from Mariupol and other nearby areas. An Auckland school has resorted to drastic measures to get attendance up. The school's principal says 20% of students aren't coming to class, and the school has spent $100,000 to combat the issue. Neil Watson says they've hired 2 attendance navigators and taken up radio ads. And 4 left-wing parties in France have agreed to form an alliance going into the country's parliamentary elections next month. Far-left politician Jean-Luc Mélenchon hopes it will create a parliamentary majority in Macron's parliament. That's the news. We'll have more news and weather at 6.
Kia ora rā e ho, nau mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. It is time for business news, ko taku hoa I nei, ko Nona Peltier. Nona, another major retail bank has seen its profits surge. Which one are we talking about?
Talking about the BNZ today, and we were talking about ANZ earlier in the week. So that's 2 of 3 that are going to be reporting this corporate reporting season. Westpac on Monday, so we haven't heard from them yet. But BNZ today said that they made a net profit in the first 6 months of their financial year of $660 million. That's a pretty big number, but not quite as big as what we saw out of the ANZ at $1.1 billion earlier this week. And you might think, well, how did that happen? It's huge demand for home loans earlier in the half, but that's expected to moderate now with the downturn in the housing market
and rising interest rates.
But they're saying in both cases that they feel they've been prudent in their lending. Of course, helped along by what we know is the triple CFA, which is that credit and consumer protection that was put in place December 1st, which saw a lot of homeowners not able to access credit because they, spent too much money on avocados, for example, or what have you. And yeah, I know. That's been, that's subject to a review. But in the meantime, it isn't that easy to get credit. So the bank's books are in pretty good shape if there is going to be a significant downturn in the housing market, which has been warned not only by a number of economists, but also by the Reserve Bank too, just recently.
Interesting. I'm interested in this. Chartered accountants worried about the government's plan for an income insurance scheme. What's worrying them about it?
Well, the detail. There's just not very much of it. And that's a big problem when you're trying to figure out how that might play out. One of the big concerns they say is that it's going to hurt lower income people because it's not clear who's going to pay for this insurance. So is it going to be the employee who pays? Is it going to be the employer? Is it going to be a mix of the two? It's not clear. But whatever happens, what the concern is that while consumers, or rather employees, may be putting money into a KiwiSaver for long-term retirement, if they take the money that they're putting into KiwiSaver and put it into an employee, sort of an income protection scheme, well, that might make sense in the short term. But what if they don't lose their job? Everybody is going to retire if they're lucky to live long enough, but not everyone is going to lose their job. So you're paying into a scheme. Do you need that scheme, or would you be better off putting your money into something else?
The same could be said about ACC levies, though, too.
That's true,
someone might never be injured.
Oh, well, lucky them.
Yeah.
Lucky them. You're right. But we do have ACC. And then, of course, while maybe ACC could be extended in some way, that's another, a question that they have. What they're basically saying is that there has been very little detail. It seems quite rushed. The government's looking to bring this in by the end of next year, 2023. They're saying, what's the hurry? This is a major piece of policy. It really needs some careful consideration. Where's the detail? How about some transparency? That's the concern that they have.
Okay, Nona, let's take a wander through the markets, eh?
Yeah, so look, the market did perk up today, and that was in line with Asia. That's now back from their holiday.
Yep.
3 days. 72-point gain, nearly 2/3% up to 11,748. The New Zealand dollar is a bit, well, I'd say it's mixed, but narrowly so, following the U.S. Federal Reserve's largest hike in interest rates in more than 2 decades. Now, still, the interest rate there is still fairly low, but the Reserve Bank, the Federal Reserve was a little less hawkish than the market was expecting. And so that helped the Kiwi. We rose about a cent from where we were yesterday to 65.3 US cents. But we're a little bit down, just a tinge there, or touch rather, 90.3 Australian, and slightly up against the British pence at 52.1.
52.1. Okay. Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier there with business news. Aucklanders buddying up with extended family or friends to buy a home are the focus of a new subdivision in the city's southeast. Houses with 6 to 8 bedrooms with split kitchens and living areas are popping up in Flatbush, designed to fit multiple groups or families under one roof. Katie Todd and camera operator Marika Habazi took a tour.
If $1.48 million for the average Auckland house is a bit steep and you don't want to compromise on space, try Bremner Ridge for size.
Typical layout would be a double garage, entrance, guest lounge, family dining, kitchen, scullery, 1 or 2 bedrooms on the ground floor with its own living area. Up on the top you'll have 2 masters, rest of the bedrooms and 1 more living area.
This Auckland subdivision is aimed at buyers who want to live in comfort and service their mortgage by cohabiting with family or friends. Around 300 of the 360 houses will have at least 6 bedrooms. Aman Panu from Harcourt says it's a winning formula. More than 90% of the lots, priced around $2 million, have sold. He says the vast majority of buyers are from ethnic communities. Many are parents and children.
When you talk about family demographics, you've got mum, dad, 2 grandkids, and 2 grandparents. Right. So essentially 3 generations are living in one house. That would be a typical of what happens.
The sections range in size from 300 square metres to 10,000 square metre lifestyle blocks. The developers, Templeton, have applied for a plan change so the houses can have 2 fully independent kitchens and living areas. That, according to Harcourt's Tegbir Singh, also opens the possibility of subletting.
So the 1 or 2 bedrooms that are set up on the ground floor, they will be let out, so you will have 1 or 2 tenants living with you. And people generally don't mind because it's people that they've known for a long time, they're usually friends, they've either studied together, they've either worked together, so the relationship is there. And it's quite a common thing within Flatbush.
An estimated 40,000 people will call Flatbush home by 2025. Auckland Council calls it the country's largest and most comprehensively planned town. 30 minutes drive from the city centre on former dairy farming land. There's supermarkets, retail stores, cafes, restaurants and medical facilities, plus a library and an aquatic centre under construction. If your Bremner Ridge house co-owners become a bit much, 40% of the subdivision is green space, with walkways, gullies and parks. Harcourt says car parks have also been considered.
And if you look at it, this is, 100-metre stretch, and you've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6... You've got 7 public parking spaces.
And it's not just families cashing in on this development. Mr. Panu says some buyers last week were mates wanting to get a foot in the market.
One of the friends has a family, the other one is just a single gentleman. They both work as truck drivers, and they both decided to buy together, and that's the only way they can afford.
Kiwi Bank also has its eye on the growing trend of cohabitation. It's launched a system called Co-Own, allowing friends and family to combine their savings for a deposit. Templeton says having a large home on a medium-sized site with multiple incomes to service a mortgage is an innovative solution to affordable housing.
Interesting concept. Let us know what you think. Would you cohabit, bring the extended whānau, your parents, maybe your brother or sister and their family, and live in a property together so that you can all afford the mortgage? Love to know what you think about that. Text us. No, actually don't text us because the text machine is not working properly. You can email us, old school, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz, or you can tweet us at checkpointrnz. Some of you getting in touch about the price freeze. Countdown announcing today that it's going to cap the prices of about 500 products through the winter months, potentially beyond. The price they are next Monday is the price they will stay regardless of inflation. David says, good on Countdown for freezing prices. I challenge Pack and Save and New World to do the same. Others, not convinced that it is all that it seems. This listener says, are we supposed to be impressed with Countdown? Freezing their prices will result in their suppliers suffering, making over 400 million excess profit. They can afford to do it without punishing their suppliers. It's a rort. Do keep your feedback coming. Email or tweet us. A review into the New Zealand Broadcasting School has uncovered a culture of bullying and harassment prompted by media reports of a toxic learning environment last year. Allegations about sexual harassment and other inappropriate behaviour from staff towards students were unfounded. The review's 60 recommendations have been accepted in full by ARA Institute of Canterbury, which the Broadcasting School sits within. Tessa Guest reports.
A former broadcasting student who was involved in the review says the review has been a long time coming.
Surviving broadcasting school is kind of seen as a bit of a rite of passage. There are so many people who just absolutely despise it and have had the worst experience.
She says the culture within the school has lasting impacts on the industry.
I think that the broadcasting school could be like the best place ever, and it just unfortunately is, in my opinion, the start of so many root issues that you see in the media industry as far as like harassment, boys club, overworked, underpaid.
Another former student who contributed to the review says she's pleased with the outcome but feels like the hurt caused by tutors has been minimised.
I think maybe that the tutors need to have a bit more duty of care to help students get help if they need it and refer them to the right places and not just tell them to sit down and shut up.
She says students were frequently reminded they were in a competitive course, had to publicly judge one another as part of a professional practice assignment, and were instructed by tutors to get drunk in front of prospective internship supervisors. She's confident the school will take the recommendations seriously, but is frustrated it wasn't a self-directed change.
I feel hopeful for kind of the wrong reasons, if you know what I mean. Like, they wouldn't have done anything unless this had been brought to media attention. Like, it's not like we haven't been complaining about it for ages.
Acting Chief Executive of ARA Institute, Darren Mitchell, says he's debriefed the review's findings with the full broadcasting school staff and says they are committed to preventing the behaviour from continuing.
I have confidence in the full team to make the changes that are necessary to ensure that that kind of behaviour does not occur or is allowed to become embedded in that learning environment.
He says a number of changes have already happened, including new leadership for the school, updated internship provider agreements, and increased mental health support. The formal complaints process is also under review. Broadcasting Minister and former student of Broadcasting School, Chris Farfoy, says he's confident the findings will be dealt with thoroughly.
I would probably take more interest as a former alumni and someone who's been obviously involved and had some interaction with the Broadcasting School. I trust both the former Christchurch Polytechnic entity and also the Broadcasting School to make sure that those issues are looked into.
3 weeks ago, the Green Party launched a People's Inquiry into student wellbeing alongside student unions across the country, which they say will address poor living and study conditions.
About 10 cars a day are being stolen on the Kapiti coast, with some being taken for joyrides. It's thought social media platform TikTok might be playing a part in the cases where youth offenders are involved. Our reporter Jake McKee and cameraman Angus Drever have the story.
TikTok might be popular, but it could also be a problem. People here on the Kapiti coast are concerned that it's influencing a spate of crime, particularly car thefts involving youth offenders. Last week, 6 young people, including 2 12-year-olds, were referred to youth aid. Police say they were interfering with vehicles in Waikanae Beach. Community social media pages have a number of posts about vehicles being stolen, found, or people catching thieves in the act. And those we've spoken to keep mentioning one thing.
Let's also look at, for example, TikTok.
TikTok is part of that driver.
Fueled by TikTok.
John Nelson's family car, a 7-seater Toyota Wish, was stolen right outside his home on Monday night. No one heard a thing, not even the dog, and he says it's devastating.
You know, we're a single income family paying a mortgage and relying on getting the kids to school.
He wants a reassurance that police are across the issue.
It'd be quite nice to see a cop car cruise up and down the street a couple of times a week just to know you're safe in your community.
Police say there have been hundreds of car thefts here on the Kapiti Coast this year. They say it's a complex issue that they can't address alone, including why youth offenders are involved in this type of offending. They recognise that social media may play a part, but they need wraparound support services, including the community, to help them. One of those community groups is Kapiti Community Patrol, a volunteer group supporting police with local crime prevention. Its leader, Rianda Brain, says he's aware of youth offenders using TikTok, posting videos to, he says, show off. And so when you say that message, is it that they are filming themselves doing thefts and posting it online?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's like that, encouraging tools like, hey, look, this is what I've done. We encourage you to do the same. You know, let's see who can get the most likes.
There were 290 vehicles stolen around Kapiti in February, 310 in March, and another 240 up until the 20th of April. Kapiti Youth Support Chief Executive Rachel Osborne says people are being influenced by unsocial behaviours they see on social media, but she says the activity is being presented as okay. Rachel Osborne thinks it's a flow-on effect of the pandemic.
COVID's isolated them, so they're not able to be connected with young people. What we're seeing here at KYS is we are seeing an increase in demand. We're seeing our services are stretched.
She also points out some offenders aren't necessarily locals and possibly themselves victims in some way who need support. Kapiti Coast District Mayor Kay Goodanathan hopes the issue can be nipped in the bud before it escalates to ram raids seen elsewhere in the country. Even though police want community support, he thinks that's not going to be enough.
Local government is not resourced in this area, that this is a central government issue and the agency's issue. But we are willing to work with them to see what can be done.
TikTok says safety is its priority, that it removes content promoting or enabling criminal activity and does sometimes lodge reports with police.
And you can watch the video version of that story from Jake and Angus. We'll put it up on our webpage. Trevor Mallard is safe in his job as Parliament Speaker for now, with the Prime Minister continuing to express her support. The Speaker performed a major back-down yesterday, withdrawing 5 trespass notices sent to former MPs, including the former Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters. The opposition parties say the notices should not have been issued in the first place, and are yet another reason for Mr Mallard to go. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
No sign of the Speaker in Parliament this afternoon as his deputy stepped in instead. It's become a fairly regular thing on Thursdays, but is symbolic of this week's sustained silence.
Mr. Acting Speaker!
Trevor Mallard has repeatedly refused to be interviewed by RNZ over the past few days, not when his trespass notice on Winston Peters came to light, and not a day later when it was hastily dropped.
I would expect him to explain himself as to what exactly has gone on here.
The opposition parties have long had a contentious relationship with the Speaker. National has tried to force no confidence votes on numerous occasions. They expressed outrage when Mr Mallard claimed a rapist was working on the premises and objected to his general handling of February's protest at Parliament. National's Chris Bishop says this surely is the final straw.
Trevor Mallard was an embarrassment months ago. The Prime Minister should lose confidence in him, sack him. Let's move on and try and make the 18 months to the next election really good for parliamentary democracy, not the embarrassing, unedifying spectacle it's been in the last few months.
I cannot name a time when opposition parties haven't had a go at the Speaker.
Jacinda Ardern says she still has confidence in Mr Mallard, describing recent events as unprecedented. She says she wants all parties to come together in the protests' aftermath,
rather than taking pot shots with no confidence statements.
Other Labour ministers did their diligent duty too. It's known many were furious with Mr Mallard over his actions, annoyed at the platform he effectively gifted Winston Peters. But the public line today was to back the Speaker, even if perhaps through gritted teeth.
It's not an easy job being the Speaker around this place, but I do.
There's been a few ups and downs with Trevor, but he remains the person who I believe is the best to be the Speaker.
He is, of course, his own person. Doesn't mean that I agree with every decision.
There's no vacancy.
No vacancy for now. Though Mr Mallard's not at risk of a no-confidence vote, there's talk round the traps he's being lined up for a diplomatic posting in Dublin. It explains why his deputy, Adrian Rudefer, has been spending more time in the chair and would be an elegant solution for what is becoming Labour's problem. Simon Bridges offered another potential solution in his farewell speech yesterday, suggesting the Speaker be chosen through an anonymous vote, as happens in Australia, Canada and the United Kingdom.
I don't see it as a panacea, but a secret ballot for Speaker, as happens in most similar parliaments today, could help wrest things away from the government of the day.
A secret ballot would allow government MPs more freedom to vote how they truly feel. The idea receiving some tentative support this afternoon.
That's something that could be worth considering.
It would lead to better discernment around who the Speaker is.
The idea's even been endorsed by the Speaker himself, who in a tweet said he thought the model worked well in most countries. We tried again for an interview with Mr Mallard tonight. He replied, "No thanks."
And the invitation stands. Mr Mallard, you could come on Checkpoint. A man has been arrested after an attack on US comedian Dave Chappelle while he was on stage at the Hollywood Bowl. Mr Chappelle has faced criticism and protests after his Netflix special last year and was accused of being transphobic. CNN's Nick Watt has the latest.
Make some noise for hip-hop history.
Dave Chappelle was introducing the next act. Suddenly, the comic colossus tackled by a man who rushed the stage, wielding a knife shaped like a replica gun.
I mean, he rammed right into him.
CNN's Rachel Crane was just a few feet away, sitting in the second row.
1 second you're laughing, and the next second, honestly, I was fearing for my life because I thought that perhaps this man had a bomb in that backpack on his back.
He did not, and Chappelle was not injured, according to the LAPD, quickly cracking jokes.
I am going to kill them.
The 23-year-old male suspect was hurt in the melee, taken to the hospital, and arrested for assault with a deadly weapon. Any motive remains unclear. Chappelle, in his recent Netflix special, does note that he angers a lot of people with his comedy.
Now listen, women get mad at me, gay people get mad at me, lesbians get mad at me, but I'm gonna tell you right now, and this is true, these transgenders, these want me dead.
This assault took place just about a mile away from another recent on-stage attack on a comedian, the infamous Oscar Slap. Last night, Chris Rock was also performing, soon by Chappelle's side, making reference, cutting the tension.
Was that Will Smith?
So, still unclear why this happened, and maybe more importantly, how this happened.
It felt like an eternity before the security got there and, intervened. In actuality, I'm sure it was just a few seconds, but it was a very charged moment, and there were gasps, screams.
4 Taranaki teenagers are hoping to carve up the opposition at the World Junior Surf Champs in El Salvador. Part of a 12-strong New Zealand team, the so-called Taranaki Grom Squad say they're stoked to be taking on the world's best. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Rob Martin has more.
The ISA World Junior Surfing Championships are being held for the first time since 2019. Natasha Goldsberry competed that year, and the 17-year-old is back for more.
Well, I went in 2019 with Tommy Butland, and it was just 2 of us from here, and now to go with 3 other people from Taranaki, it's pretty sick because we're all friends and surf together.
Her mates and joining her on the world stage are Kalani Lewis, Spencer Rowson and Skylar McFetteridge. It'll be 15-year-old Spencer's first time out of the country.
Pretty excited, pretty nervous though.
Skylar is competing in the under-16 division and she's not shy on her aims.
Hopefully I'll win it or get in the finals. That's my goal. Or just do my best in all my heats I do.
Kalani's dad, Mark, says the break since the last comp allowed the Taranaki Grom squad to be formed.
It came about from needing to focus so that the kids were kind of pulling together and putting more effort into what they're doing rather than just surfing, working on technique, working on physical fitness.
He says fellow dads Kane Rowson and Paul McFetteridge put in the hard yards with the youngsters.
Oh, they're training a few times a week, like physical training and going over footage and whatnot, and then they're actually physically surfing. I don't know how many hours a week they surf. It's ridiculous. Yeah, a lot of hours surfing.
Mark, who will travel with Kalani to El Salvador, says hearing the 17-year-old had been chosen to compete in the under-18 boys division was mind-blowing.
Yeah, what an opportunity. It's like your kid making the All Blacks, I guess. Like an early age group All Black team or something like that. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
About 370 competitors from more than 40 countries are set to compete at the 18th edition of the Junior Worlds in under-18 and under-16 boys and girls divisions. The Taranaki Grom squad teens have raised $10,000 each to get to El Salvador. Kalani is hoping the Grom squad will inspire the next generation of micro-Groms.
I think, definitely when I was younger, some of the guys like Tom Butland I definitely looked up to, because I seen them going away to heaps of comps and that, and it made me want to do it as well. So I don't know, hopefully since 4 of us are going, a couple of girls and boys will see us all and try aspire to do what we're doing as well.
The ISA World Junior Surfing Championships will be held from May the 27th through to June the 5th.
Dave's reckons here on the grocery prices. Dave says while Countdown's vow to hold the line on prices could be seen as a form of veiled brand advertising by some, I commend their move. It's a way of pitching in for the common good, which is an admirable down-under trait.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening, kia ora tātou. I'm Evie Ashton. Countdown is putting a temporary price freeze on 500 items over winter in response, it says, to the rising cost of living. The freeze, which starts on Monday, applies to staples such as butter, cheese, sugar and flour. Spokesperson Steve Mills says the supermarket chain has been working closely with suppliers about the plan. He's defending how much prices have already risen, telling Checkpoint Countdown has been grappling with the rising cost of things like fuel, transport, labour and raw commodities.
Average price increases we're seeing come across our desks is around 9% at the moment. And in the last 10 months, we've received close to 1,000 price increases, which is more than double the same period last year.
Steve Mills says Countdown has already absorbed some of those increases and not passed them on to customers. A woman fled a knife-wielding attacker with cuts to her face and a collapsed lung after a stabbing at a Cambridge restaurant last night. Court documents seen by Open Justice show she ran across the road to a service station to get help, despite later being rushed to hospital in a critical condition. A 31-year-old man is accused of entering the rear door of the Sahara India restaurant in the suburb of Leamington and stabbing 2 people as the woman and a man worked in the kitchen. A third person who tried to intervene also suffered a stab wound to the abdomen. Waipa District Mayor Jim Milcrest says he understands it was a case of domestic violence. Up to 9,000 cattle may have to be destroyed on the last remaining property in the country with Mycoplasma bovis. 271 farms have been cleared of the cattle disease since it was discovered in New Zealand 4 years ago. The only cases of infection are now at the Ansco 5-star feedlot in Ashburton. Biosecurity Minister Damien O'Connor says they'll be eradicated over next summer.
We've been working through, obviously, a big operation. It's important to get it right, but there was no point in cleaning up that farm if there was the possibility of infected animals coming back, reinfecting, and us having to repeat this. It's an expensive operation, but one we're working through very carefully.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says that while the National Eradication Programme has reached a milestone, new cases are still likely to show up. The United Nations says it's evacuated another 300 civilians from Mariupol and other nearby areas, and more evacuations are planned. The latest convoys don't include people from the besieged Azovstal steelworks, but Russia has said it will implement a ceasefire from tomorrow to allow civilian evacuations from there. At least 200 Ukrainian civilians are thought to be trapped inside the giant plant. The ousted president of the West African country of Guinea is to be tried for murder and other crimes allegedly committed during his time in office. Alpha Condé, who is 84, was toppled in a military coup last September. The BBC's Will Ross reports.
A document from Guinea's public prosecutor says Alpha Condé is among 27 former senior officials who are facing a long list of alleged crimes. These include murder, illegal detentions, abductions, torture, rape and kidnapping. It seems the allegations relate to the final months of Mr Condé's time in office, when the security forces were used to crush opposition to his third term. Dozens of people were shot dead for taking to the streets. The public prosecutor, who was appointed by Guinea's military rulers, said the case was launched following a complaint filed by the FNDC, an umbrella group that spearheaded those protests.
Auckland councillors are backing a $306 million cycling plan, despite fears a top-up of $1.7 billion will be needed. The council's planning committee voted this afternoon to endorse Auckland Transport's plan for improving the bike network in the coming decade. Councillor Angela Dalton says today's debate about costs rising north of $2 billion should not derail the need for a plan.
We have to have a strategy, or else we're rudderless in what we do. So I'm not quite sure about why the $2 billion at this point in time is a concern.
13 councillors voted for the plan, 3 opposed it and 7 abstained. And the Conservation Minister may have a more hands-on role if proposed changes to conservation rules become law. The proposals are focused on streamlining the processes for concessions and reviewing national park rules. They also give the Minister the power to create legislation allowing an activity without the need for a concession. Kitty Allen says her role needs powers to better respond to issues of the day.
The hands of the Minister of Conservation are tied in areas where the public have a higher expectation that action can be taken, and I think that is a failure, that it should be and can be mitigated, and these proposals, I think, take us towards that type of outcome.
The deadline for submissions is June the 30th. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, our overseas correspondent Shobha Narayan is on the line from Bangalore, India. Our Changing World visits the rich and rare limestone ecosystems of the Waitaki Valley. And podiatrist Emma Worthington offers advice on getting your kids' feet ready for the winter sports season, how to keep them from ending up like Achilles with a bad heel. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
You're back on Checkpoint with Lisa Owen shortly. First, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. Partly cloudy for Northland and Coromandel with a few showers, clearing about the Coromandel Peninsula tomorrow afternoon. Partly cloudy with a few showers for Gisborne, clearing this evening. For the remaining North Island regions, fine apart from areas of low cloud or fog morning and evening. Looking at Te Waipounamu, Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, cloudy periods and a few showers, clearing from Bulla this evening. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and coastal Otago. Fine apart from areas of low cloud or fog, clearing this afternoon but returning tomorrow morning for a time. Southland and the remainder of Otago, fine apart from areas of high cloud. And for Rekohu, the Chatham Islands, low cloud or fog. There are a few showers developing tomorrow morning. The time is 6 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Nā mihi iwi, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A new $300 plan, a $300 million plan, I should say, for Auckland cycleways ran into strong headwinds today. Some councillors believe the plan could make Auckland the next best thing to Copenhagen, but others believe it swallows up valuable road space. And as Phil Pennington reports, $300 million is just the start.
A year ago, Mayor Phil Goff told Auckland Transport that councillors were unhappy that it was in go-slow mode on cycleways. Councillor Chris Darby was a critic then, but today became a cheerleader as AT came asking the planning committee that he chairs to endorse its priorities for spending the $306 million of cycling money.
All the evidence in the world is this: if there's any one thing you can do as a city, is you get people biking. And we can be a Copenhagen in the South Pacific, and we can be in Amsterdam.
At a price. The $300 million is just the start of it, and too rich for several councillors today. AT Deputy Chair Wayne Donnelly, though, and his agency staffers told councillors it's worth it.
There is a strong economic case for the proposed investments and activities outlined in the program business case. The difficulty is that the current resources will not enable many of them to be put in place.
Auckland Transport forecasts a minimum $1 billion is needed in coming years and more than $2 billion to get to a full network if the city is to achieve goals of cycling making up 7% of trips and of cutting emissions to 2030 targets. Councillors had been sent the 300-page business case just last night, with several upset they'd not had time to digest the plan. It envisages more cycle paths, especially on strategic routes, say between shops and schools, safer sharing with cars, including by taking up some traffic lanes and some roadside car parking, and a lot more bike education for children. It works out at about $5 million per kilometre. AT argues that 60% of Aucklanders would bike if it was safe, but Councillor Wayne Walker questions at what price.
While I'm entirely supportive of funding cycling, I've got real concerns around the gold-plated approach that we continue to take and the real absence of cycling numbers on many cycleways that people see on a daily basis.
The cheap aim is to boost cycling fivefold, from 25,000 rides a day to 125,000. The $1 billion plus goal to boost it 12 times. The Mayor Phil Goff and Councillor Pippa Coom were among those strongly backing the plan to get more kids riding to school, to cut deaths and injuries and to cut those emissions. One headwind, though, results from the controversial car parking strategy debated in March that aims to remove 3% of roadside parking in the next decade. AT planner Ella Davis told councillors the parking plan is fundamental to the cycling plan.
We're looking at repurposing, in some instances, car parking, in some instances, flush median space, in some instances, narrowing general traffic lanes. And that is what we see overseas. And that really is the key behind this sort of accelerated and more affordable rollout of our cycle network.
Councillor Greg Sayers says it amounts to a perfect storm of roading given up for cycleways that might not be used, even as funding is taken away from core maintenance to stop people tripping on footpaths. Councillor Desley Simpson says a plan that depends on spending billions more to really work should be left to a new council and mayor to be voted in next year. Daniel Newman, one of 3 councillors to vote against the plan, and 7 abstained, says his constituents are telling him that bikes only is not a balanced approach, and he questions spending up to $2 billion to cut emissions by just 30,000 tonnes.
I don't think that that's much at all. I think that is literally farting against thunder, I'm sorry to say.
Councillor Angela Dalton, though, told the meeting if you build it, they will come, as has happened on the southern path near Takanini. She says the debate's focus on money was surprising, given that no extra money, and certainly not $2 billion, is being asked for above and beyond the $300 million already approved. Independent Māori Statutory Board member Tau Henare says mana whenua were not consulted properly, so he abstained.
Well, joining me now is Auckland Councillor Pippa Coom. Kia ora, Pippa.
Kia ora, Lisa.
So this idea of $5 million a kilometre, why can't it be done for less?
Well, I think it absolutely can be done for less, and Auckland Transport have shown us that they can.
Oh, Pippa, sorry, can I just interrupt you? We're having real problems with your phone line there, and I'm sure there'll be lots of cyclists and other people keen as to hear you. So can I get you just to sort of wiggle around a bit and give it another crack?
See how we go. Sorry about that.
That's okay. All right. I think you're in a better spot now. So you were going to explain $5 million a kilometre. Can it be done for cheaper?
Absolutely, it can be done for cheaper. And Auckland Transport are already delivering separated infrastructure where they're doing it for about $2 million a kilometre. And it can also be done by leveraging other budgets, for example, through renewals or through upgrades that are already planned.
Okay, so one of the councillors today thinks that it's too big a decision to spend that kind of money. Shouldn't be decided by this council, and I'm talking about the potential projection of up to $2 billion, and that you should wait for a new council and new mayor to rubber stamp it. What do you make of that?
Well, we weren't being asked today to approve the $2 billion. We were asked today to prioritise the money that's already been allocated, the $306 million that's already in our transport plan. So today was about where should that be prioritised.
So you are right behind this. Sell it to people. Why? Why should we spend this money and potentially in the billions?
Well, everybody benefits when people can ride safely, when children can get to school safely on bikes. And it's also not just about bikes, it's micro-mobility too. So it benefits those who might be using mobility scooters as well as e-scooters. And it also benefits motorists because the more people that are riding, the more people that are reducing congestion and getting out of the way of drivers. And then you've got to think of all the other benefits, health benefits, reducing pollution, making our neighbourhoods safer. We've had 2 cyclists who've just died in the last month on our roads. That's just unacceptable. So the community all round benefits when more people are riding, and all the evidence backs that up.
I see this figure quoted that more than half of Aucklanders say they would ride bikes more if they thought it was safe to do so. Do you think that is a realistic number, or people just like the dream or the idea and they won't actually get off their butts and onto their bikes?
Well, I think it's the fact that we can ride our bikes in all different kinds of ways. It's not necessarily giving up a car 100% for all of our trips. It's just being able to put it in the mix. So if people can get to the shops a few times a week on a bike, or get to a job or a school and just choose a couple of days a week, that all makes a difference. And we know that people want to be able to do that, and we know that they want to be able to ride a bike safely when it comes to recreation. And we saw a huge increase in people out on their bikes and walking through lockdowns when it felt, a lot safer out on our streets. So, yeah, absolutely, I think we can see a massive uptake in cycling if we make it safe to do so.
Has there been a cost-benefit analysis done for the whole cost of doing this?
Well, some of the information in our report today was saying even the investment that's proposed, the $306 million, that has a benefit cost ratio of between $2 and $3. So for every dollar invested, we're getting about 2 times or 3 times the return. But, lots of studies show that it can go up to 20 times more. So, there's heaps of benefits. And then there's also how do you actually cost all those external benefits like the health, the pollution, reducing our carbon emissions. All of those things need to get factored in as well.
This is not going to stop at $300 million. This is basically the first invoice, right?
Yeah, this is the funds that have already been allocated. I mean, personally, I think we should be really serious about delivering the whole network and doing it as fast as possible. And even if we're spending $2 billion, that is just great value for money. And it's it's still a very small percentage of our transport budget, which is over $35 billion over the next 10 years.
So in order to do that, you would, not do something else? Because the council is we're constantly told that the council is short of money. They're financially up against it. So where does the final price tag, where does that money come from?
Well, at the moment, again, there's only the $306 million that has been allocated.
But that's not all it's going to cost. If you wanted to go the whole hog to achieve the goals that you want and raise the number of bike trips every day, that the $300 million is not going to get you there.
Yeah, well, it's about prioritising, and I would absolutely prioritise investment in cycling, because also you've got to remember...
Over what, Pippa? What would you forego in order to achieve it?
Well, we've got some big roading projects on the books that might need to be re-looked at, but also just to flag as well that a lot of the funds come from government too. So if we put up $1, we get $1 from government as well. So it's not all council ratepayer money that we're talking about. So it's great value for money in terms of the investment we can make.
Pippa, could you name the roading projects you'd ditch?
Well, there's none that's being looked at the moment in terms of where the $2 billion has to come from. So, when we get to that, that will be next term's discussion about where the funds need to come from. But I should also say that we are actually, putting our budget where our mouth is, in that we've just looking at raising a targeted climate action targeted rate, which is going to put some more investment into cycling.
Appreciate your time. That is Pippa Coom, Auckland Councillor there. It is almost 18 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Moscow is still calling the Ukraine war its special military operation. Opinion polls suggest many Russians do back what the Kremlin is doing, influenced perhaps by the constant pro-war messaging on Russian TV. It raises the questions as to whether Russia bears collective responsibility for the death and destruction in Ukraine. A question discussed increasingly by critics of the Kremlin, as the BBC's Steve Rosenberg reports.
How can a country that has produced such beauty also spread such horror? Russia is Rachmaninoff, Malevich, Pushkin, but it is also an aggressor state, accused of war crimes in Ukraine. And for that, who is to blame? Some speak of the collective guilt of the Russian people. Pianist Vyacheslav Gryaznov, who is currently outside Russia, disagrees.
We should not put all the nation to take this responsibility of Mr. Putin, what he's doing. Because we have rights to elect, but the elections themselves are not fair. So it's very difficult to change the situation.
Moscow journalist Yevgenia Albats isn't so forgiving of her compatriots.
I do think that Russians as a nation, we as a people, we are responsible for what is happening in Ukraine. We're responsible for this war. We did allow Putin to stay in power for 22 years. We did allow all this rhetoric to consume the minds of ordinary folks.
And many Russians do back the Kremlin over Ukraine.
I would say significant part of Russians, maybe a strong majority, supports war.
Vladimir Pastukhov is a senior research associate at University College London. He believes that it's Russians' failure to face up to their past that helps explain the present violence.
Russians rejected communism only by words, but they haven't rejected it from their hearts. 70 years of lie, 70 years of repressions, all of that was somewhere hidden under the floor and just appeared now.
But journalist Yevgenia Albats feels personally responsible.
I fought this regime all these 22 years. I always was against this KGB corporation which took over the country. However, it means that I lost. And that's why I'm guilty.
The US Federal Reserve raised interest rates by 0.5 percentage point, the biggest rate hike since 2000. The central bank now faces the delicate balancing act of managing soaring inflation without pushing America into a recession. The BBC's Michelle Fleury reports.
The price of a Big Mac is up 7% since last year, and it's not just burger costs being supersized. Consumer prices at their highest level in 4 decades, causing not only economic pain, but political pain. President Biden responding by touting his efforts to boost growth and reduce the deficit.
Bringing down the deficit is one way to ease inflationary pressures in an economy where a consequence of a war and gas prices and oil and food and it all, it's a different world right this moment.
Fighting inflation is primarily the job of America's central bank, which raised the cost of borrowing by 0.5 percentage point, with Fed Chair Jerome Powell saying more hikes of the same size were likely at the next 2 meetings.
Inflation is much too high, and we understand the hardship it is causing, and we're moving expeditiously to bring it back down. We have both the tools we need and the resolve that it will take to restore price stability on behalf of American families and businesses.
US financial markets soared after Mr. Powell ruled out an even larger rate hike. The Dow rallied more than 900 points, or nearly 3%. There are signs their policy is having an impact on the housing market. Mortgage rates have risen along with interest rates as the Fed wants.
So behind you we have a rental building that's...
Realtor Jay Nix is receiving fewer offers from potential buyers after the buying frenzy that marked the pandemic.
We've seen a few people who backed out of this, or home searches, or I have one client who says that they had to adjust their price point. I still want to buy, but I'm going to have to change my budget.
That's amazing. I love this area.
First-time home buyer Mia Navarro wants to jump in before rates get any higher. As mortgages become more expensive, she's been able to afford less.
When I originally started my search, I definitely had a bigger budget based off of what the rates were at the time. And once they started to hike, not only did it change and dwindle down what I could put down as a down payment, but I also had to be realistic with what my monthly payments were going to be because of the interest rates.
Plenty of economists think the Fed was behind the curve in combating inflation, leaving it with little choice but to tighten monetary policy aggressively now. And that leaves many people nervous that in the months ahead it risks overshooting and tipping an already tepid economy into recession.
Hong Kong largely managed to control the spread of COVID-19, but the Omicron variant overwhelmed the health system. The city recorded the highest death rate in the world, and many of those affected are the vulnerable, the underprivileged and the elderly. The BBC's Danny Vincent has more.
For Mr. Fong, home is a 3-metre squared cage. The city's extreme poor live in subdivided apartments. Hong Kong is one of the most densely populated cities in the world. Until recently, 6 people lived in this room. But when Omicron hit, he lost 2 roommates in the space of a week.
One person died on that bed. The other person also died. He slept over on that bed. We called the ambulance. It got through, but no one picked up.
For the poor, living with COVID means living in tiny apartments where the virus can easily spread. Self-isolating is almost impossible.
It was too late. He died at about 8 p.m. that night. He suffered a lot. He kept saying he was unwell, he had asthma and underlying illnesses.
Hong Kong is coming out of the 5th wave of COVID-19, but this city is stuck between 2 seemingly opposing policies, and it's the most vulnerable in this society that have suffered. 9 families live inside this narrow dwelling. We're taken to another subdivided apartment. Since the latest outbreak, they've been living in isolation, supported by social workers. Darway has been living in his cramped apartment for 12 years. He's barely left his room for 3 months. He's unvaccinated. Many of the elderly in Hong Kong are reluctant to get the jab.
Actor Amber Heard has been on the stand in a defamation trial brought by her former husband, Johnny Depp. He originally sued her for $50 million over a Washington Post article in which she described herself as a victim of domestic abuse. He denies the allegations, and Ms. Heard then countersued him for $100 million. A warning, there is some strong language in this report by the BBC's David Silito.
Thank you, Your Honour. Will you please state your name?
Yes, it's Amber Laura Heard.
And what is
Amber Heard. Over the last 3.5 weeks, she has sat in court each day and listened as a series of witnesses and her ex-husband have described her as violent, emotionally unstable and a liar. This was finally her chance to give her side of the story.
Why are you here?
I am here because my ex-husband is suing me for an op-ed I wrote.
And how do you feel about that?
struggle to have the words. I struggle to find the words to describe how painful this is. This is horrible. This is the most painful and difficult thing I've ever gone through.
This, the beginning of her story of a marriage that she says left her injured and traumatised. And sitting just feet away in front of her, the man who she says assaulted and abused her, Johnny Depp.
Do you remember the first time that he physically hit you?
Yes.
Please tell the jury about it.
She said Johnny Depp had been taking cocaine, and it was a comment about one of his tattoos that led to abusive language and violence.
Slapped me across the face. And I laughed. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. I thought, this must be a joke. He said, you think it's so funny? You think it's funny? You think you're a funny? And he slapped me again.
It was, she says, just the beginning of years of abuse.
I thought he was the love of my life. And he was. He was. But he was also this other thing. He was also this other thing. And that other thing was awful.
Throughout it all, Johnny Depp sat head down with his notes and jelly beans. All of it, he says, is untrue, but his ex-wife has much more to say.
All right, the last word on the grocery price freeze at Countdown goes to Martin. He says they're flippin' expensive at the best of times. At my local Countdown, a standard 1 kg block of Colby would have cost me $13.90. That was on special. Exactly the same brand and product cost me $10.60 at Pack and Save. So Countdown, Martin says, needs substantial price reductions, not just freezers. The media communications from this company are disingenuous to say the least, he reckons. The late news team, they will keep you updated throughout the evening. And don't forget, if you want to catch up on anything from Checkpoint, you can find us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Ko te kaupapa tuatahia pōpō, and tomorrow from 5 a.m, First Up speaks to animal charity Hoo Ha about its road trip for a mischief of 77 pet rats. The creatures, they mean, not the ones that you shove up your nose. Don't miss it.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Kia ora tātou, I'm Evie Ashton. Countdown is putting a temporary price freeze on 500 items over winter, but a spokesperson says they're grappling with the rising cost of fuel, transport, labour and raw commodities. Russia says it will implement a ceasefire tomorrow to allow civilians to be evacuated from the besieged steelworks in Mariupol in Ukraine. And Auckland councillors have voted in favour of a $306 million